Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, your global feel-good radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Maxine Taylor. Maxine Taylor is an astrologer, and we're going to be talking with Maxine Taylor about her wonderful new book called Your First Sexual Imprinting, a method for releasing old emotional trauma. You can find out more about Maxine Taylor and her wonderful work at her website, MaxineTaylor.com. Welcome, Maxine Taylor.
Thank you so much, Catherine. As always, it's great to be with you. So thank you for inviting me.
Now, Maxine Taylor, your book is called Your First Sexual Imprinting. What is our first sexual imprinting? Explain for our audience what that actually is.
I'd be glad to do that. The first time we have any sexual experience, we are imprinted. The first time we have any angry experience, we are imprinted by that. In other words, our first anything sets the tone for the rest of our lives. And sexual energy is so powerful. It has a life of its own. And what I've done over the decades I've been a practicing astrologer is I've interviewed people, and I have mainly women, and the stories they have told me about who they are, how they are, where they are at, convinced me that that programming, which is so deep and so intrinsic, is vitally important to a woman, particularly because in our culture, women have been denigrated, women have been used. And I grew up during the women's liberation time when Gloria Steinem founded Ms. Magazine, and oh my goodness gracious, there was great rebellion. Now what I have found, and it's been in the news, is that so many women are stepping forward to talk about how they were molested. The well-known men in our culture who have been dethroned because of their sexual approach to women, their a self-centered form of entitlement. It's intrinsic in a patriarchal society, and it starts with presidents and works its way down. And what I realized was, if a woman has been molested or maligned in any way sexually, or received less money, with less pay for the same job, all this kind of stuff, if she had to tolerate smart aleck sexual innuendos at work, and particularly if she was molested or raped, this is not the first time it happened. And so since, as you know, because you were an integral part of my Take Back Your Life title of my workshops, what I wanted to do was help women get over it, release the trauma. Because usually if it happens when a woman is 3 or 5, and it continues after that, she's programmed for it. She doesn't know the words to use for it, but she is programmed. If a woman is raped at age 17, 18, 19, 20, 30, 40, it happened. That's not the first time it happened. It happened earlier. And very often women are laughed at because of it. They're not taken seriously. And the trauma is so deep that they can't get over it. And so when one woman comes forward, you get these herds of women coming forward. And I thought, well, I know that I can help women release their programming on anything, whether it's money, whether it's sex, whether it's raising children, whether it's career. And Catherine, you, of course, were an integral part of that. Will you, now, first of all, I have, when I interviewed the women in my book, this is Your First Sexual Imprinting, they gave me pseudonyms, pen names for themselves. So every woman in this book who tells her story and uses a name, that ain't her name. She is anonymous. However, you wrote a brilliant foreword for this book. I would love for you to share your part of this.
Absolutely. And I will absolutely get to that. But before I get to that, so I want to clarify for our audience so they can follow you about your very important book, because very few people, we hear about the Me Too movement.
Yes.
Okay. But very few people have the actual courage to write on this very important subject. So basically, to clarify for our audience, our first sexual imprinting is basically the first time we have any sexual encounter, whether it's so-called positive or negative.
Exactly.
Okay. And the word imprinting, will you share for our audience, as an author, what do you mean by imprinting?
It is carved in stone. It is when you imprint something, it's there, and it's there for good until you erase the stone. And so it's your programming. And I'm very, when I do an astrological reading, I go into our programming because we can see our mother's message, our father's message, the matriarch's message, the message from our ancestors, our cultural background, and ethnic groups are particularly programmed by their forefathers because they want to keep the lineage up. And so to me, the birth chart tells it so clearly. And what I realized was astrology is fabulous for seeing our programming, but it does not get rid of it. It brings it to our attention, which is great. We want that. But then what do? And so the women I have interviewed are incredibly courageous, and I have dedicated this book to them because it meant going back in time and telling a story that many of them have never, ever, ever told to a soul. And that is cathartic. That is, and what I've done with each of the women, for each of the women, is I have carried them through my Take Back Your Life sessions, which I offer on my website, so that I can carry them through that trauma, and they can release it and rewrite it out of their lives. It takes incredible courage on the part of a woman to do that, because she goes back in time emotionally to when it happened. And I always say, this is, stand back and look at it. You can feel it, but you're not going to wallow in it. We're going to move through it. As you know, that's the whole process. Will you go back into it? Will you go back into your story? Of course you will, but you now have a technique for getting out of it instantly and seeing with each release deeper and deeper causes for what happened. And what is so important for the woman to know is that the little child inside her who was molested or raped or whatever, treated inappropriately, it is not her fault. So many women feel ashamed that they've done something wrong. They have not done anything wrong. They have been victimized. And so getting rid of the victim role is huge because it affects every area of their life. If you're programmed to be a victim, guess what? You're going to invite egomaniacs, perhaps narcissists, who will victimize you if you allow it. And so this is much deeper than, oh, he touched me inappropriately. It's, he touched me inappropriately. Why did I create that? Because of my programming, and because very often women are not given the respect, they're not listened to, they're not heard. They are crying out for help because when they were little kids, they didn't know what was happening, but their parental reaction said they did something bad. No, they did not. And I want to say, no, they did not. There is nothing wrong with them. They are telling the truth, but you don't have the words to verbalize it when you're 5 or 6. You do when you're 15 or 16 or 45 and 46. So
to summarize for our audience, our first sexual imprinting, first of all, is your first sexual encounter. Again, whether it's, we'll call it positive or negative. And the imprinting is the energetic pattern that it sets up for all our subsequent intimate encounters through the rest of our life. Did I get that correct, Maxine?
Oh, you did beautifully.
Okay. Now, one of the things that we know statistically is that globally, all over the world, throughout their lifetime, 1 in 3 women experience physical or sexual violence from an intimate partner or sexual violence from a non-partner. And here in the US, 1 out of 6 women have been the victim of either an attempted or a completed rape. So for our audience, can your system that you talk about in your new book, Your First Sexual Imprinting, a method for releasing old emotional trauma, can your method help women who've been the victims of physical or sexual violence or attempted rape or completed rape?
Absolutely. That's what all of the stories are about. And I have, as I said, very courageous women. I have women who didn't want to be included because going back in time was painful. And what I have seen in so many of the women was that they're supposed to keep it a deep, dark secret because it reflects on the family. It reflects on the mommy. Remember, our mother carries us for 9 months. We think the way she thinks. And if a mother has experienced any type of molestation or even a put down, that child is going to be programmed for that in utero. And yes, this system works.
And for now, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors. So Maxine Taylor, when you were writing this book, you asked me if you would interview me, and I ended up writing the introduction for your wonderful new book. And because you helped me personally, which I am extremely grateful for. And um, we used your method because you have your own help, your own created healing method called Take Back Your Life. Can you explain for our audience, what is your method of taking back your life? How does that work?
Well, first of all, it started with my first non-astrology book, because I used to call Take Back Your Life, Move into the Magic. Because when you release your programming, it is magical. You move into the magic of the truth, of true love, of God. You move out of the world and into a multiverse of love and peace and creativity. You become joyful, you become happy, you are free. When you go back into your story, you're back in the same old, same old. So this is where it began. And I call it Take Back Your Life because that is what you do. When you give your power away, and when you are molested or raped or touched inappropriately, you are, as a child, you are powerless. And that's where you get the victim. When we say, oh, you've been victimized, well, that's your invitation, and it's not your fault. That's what happened to you when you were a child. You were taken advantage of. You were abused, whether it's a physical beating or sexual, inappropriate sexuality. You didn't know any better. And the person who did it did know what they were doing, which is why the uproar in recent times over male celebrities, starting with the 45th president of the United States and working its way down. I mean, it starts at the top, but I'm not saying that that person is responsible for everything that went on, but that's the figurehead. It starts anywhere. It can be anybody, but there is a place inside of you that questions yourself, doubts yourself, because you have given, without realizing it, your power away. And when that happens once, from then on, you will give your power, and the sexual power is powerful. You will give it away to another person. In this case, I'm speaking about straight women who give it away to men, because I'm straight, so I'm writing about what I know. This, I can't, a lot of people said, well, why don't you write it from the man's standpoint? Because men have been molested. We have the Catholic Church. We won't even go there. And I said, but I am a woman. The only experience I have is as a woman, a straight white woman. So there you go. And by the way, the women I interviewed are all ages, all nationalities, all ethnicities, because we are one. And this is true for all women.
So Maxine Taylor, I can remember years ago, I was doing a medical intuitive reading on a woman who struggled with her weight. And at the time that I worked with her, I believe she was about 300 pounds. And I said to her in our very first session, I said, your weight is not your fault. And she confirmed to me that she had been sexually abused as a child. I believe she was 8 years old when she had been sexually abused. And her body weight was literally a fortress, a barrier, a physical impediment to anybody getting close to her. And this is whether you're 300 pounds or not, I think this is an experience that many women can relate to. And so many women have an unhealthy relationship with their body and their body weight. They don't like their weight. They don't like the way they look. How do you think our sexual imprinting affects our relationship with our body and even our weight?
You just described it perfectly. It is a barrier, it's a protection, um, so that they'll find us undesirable. Also, it's a punishment for ourselves if we're blaming ourselves. And we replace love with food. Very often, people overeat because they can't get what they want, which is love. And when I think about how many people have an addiction to sugar, for example, well, sugar is ruled by Venus. Love is ruled by Venus. If you can't get love, you turn to sugar. It's just one example. A lot of people, as they relive their childhood on a daily basis, find that they were encouraged to eat. If they were upset, their mother would give them food, for that as an example. There are many, many reasons. However, because of this book, which talks about sex and the sexual imprinting, which everybody has a form of it. Yes, of course, I understand perfectly. And it's because you blame yourself and you need reassurance. No, you're not bad. No, you didn't do anything bad. I think Oprah used to say she eats her emotions, and women can certainly, well, men too, can identify with that really strongly.
Now, Maxine Taylor, in your book, Your First Sexual Imprinting, you talk about our bad message. What is our bad message? And how can women, and again, this continues on with what we're saying, because so many women receive the message and buy into the message that their body is bad. And then this message that your body is bad, can transform into every kind of eating disorder that you can possibly imagine. It can transform into different forms of self-abuse, which is whether it's self-harming, cutting, suicidal attempts. So can you explain for our audience, what is our bad message and how can that relate to our relationship with our body?
Well, the bad message is our initial imprinting of all time. And we can get that bad message when we are in utero, because statistics and studies have, in fact, Oprah Winfrey, I mentioned her earlier, has come out with a new book that she wrote with an MD that talks about how the uterus, the baby in utero picks up on every emotion that the mother has. So the baby is primed. If the mother thinks she's bad, the baby thinks she's bad. And this is true for men too. Okay, after birth, when the baby is no longer carried inside the mother, but alongside the mother, there comes a time when, for little girls, it's when they're approximately 3, little boys approximately 6, when they do something that children are not supposed to do. A little child plays, they enjoy themselves. And so I'll approach it from the standpoint of a woman. At about 3 years old, the little girl starts exploring and moving out of range of mother, who feels that she has lost control. At that point, mother can yell, cry, turn her back on the little girl, And the little girl thinks, oh my God, what have I done wrong? Because she was just being a little girl. But the mother said by her actions, you're bad. And for the rest of her life, that little girl tries to get good enough for mother. And I have seen grown women still call their mother, if she's still alive, to get her permission to do something. Very successful women, because she is still trying to get good enough. Well, that is the start of every problem. Look at political dictators. They have an enormous bad message that they cover up by doing horrible things in order to get daddy's attention, because they figured out what makes them good enough in the eyes of daddy. Now, daddy, mommy, doesn't matter. Once you get a bad message, that can be triggered with a glance from the checkout girl at the supermarket. It can be triggered with a statement, a put down, a joke about them. And they are back to being 3 years old. And so I start with the bad message, because the bad message puts them in the role of victim. It's all about victim. And so my first chapter in all of my Take Back Your Life books starts with the bad message. And most people, well, about 50% of the people remember when they got the bad message. 50% don't remember it. And what we do, since our story, our life is a movie, and the same story plays every day, all the time. It's this same stuff, different day. There was a movie with Bill Murray years ago in which he saw that he could replay what the mistakes he made in
Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day.
Yes, Groundhog Day. Great movie. Perfect example. That's what we do. And we don't want to change because we're scared of what might be. And I remember one time when a group of my friends got together, this was decades ago, and threw me a birthday party at my favorite Asian restaurant. And I cried all the way to the party because I had to give up the belief that I was unlovable. Now, you'd have thought, oh, move into it and enjoy it. But I couldn't handle love. I couldn't and this is why relationships don't work. And when we are old enough and have done enough work on ourselves and are able to receive love, we have to pinch ourselves because you can't believe it. But what that tells us is we've come far enough to be able to love ourselves. And that's the whole purpose of all my books, helping people love themselves. When I do a Take Back Your Life session, wow, and it's on my website, of course, I want the person to love themselves. Now, your story will kick in, of course, but you have a technique for releasing it, and I'm always available, of course.
And on that note, let's have another message from one of our sponsors. So Maxine Taylor, how does this bad message that we receive translates over for women? Because so many of us women, we don't like our bodies, we struggle, we think my hair should be different, my shape should be different, my weight should be different, there's something wrong with my body. How does, in your opinion, how does this bad message and our sexual imprinting affect our belief, our core belief that our body is bad?
Well, I think you've just answered it in your question. You've nailed it perfectly. When you buy that you're bad in everything. And I've seen women who are overweight and look like they just rolled out of bed. But that is what they had to do to get good enough for their mommy.
Mm-hmm.
And they've given their power away to the person, in this case, mom, who gave them the bad message. And even, as I said, grown women will try and get a good enough message from their mother. We want permission to step out away from her and away from the family and express our true selves, and we are not able to do that. So there are several reasons for not liking our body. I have found that when people do take back your life, the way they look at their body is instantly changed. It's transformed because they're good enough. They don't have to punish themselves. They don't need to stuff their face with food for enjoyment. We've all sat there with a bag of chocolate chip cookies and said, I'll have one. Sure. Right. Because we turned to sugar for for the endorphins, for the happy feeling. And I always say to people when I counsel them, give yourself a break, do what you love to do. And chocolate helps. It really does.
Now, Maxine Taylor, if you and I tried to list the categories of powerful men who have been publicly declared to be involved in sexual abuse, this would go all the way from, very powerful Catholic priests, presidents, governors, heads of Fortune 500 companies. So powerful men often abuse their power through sexual abuse. How can women take back our sexual power?
By getting to the core of their first sexual imprinting. The beauty of Take Back Your Life, the technique that I have come up with, is that in releasing it, you allow yourself for just a second or two to feel the emotions that coincide with the molestation. If you're confused, if you're sad, if you're frightened, whatever it is, you go back to that event. And I am there with the woman online, on Zoom. You go back to it, and when you feel it, it is lodged somewhere in your body, usually along one of the chakras. It's just very, very easy. First, second, third, fourth. And what I explain is that they have bought a lie that they are bad. They have bought the belief that they are a victim. That is a lie. And if we are holding on to a lie, that lie wants out. So all you have to do is identify where it is in your body, relax your body, and you will feel the emotion, the tension, the representation of the molestation start rising up through the top of your head, and you turn it over to God. It's in the best hands it can be. There's no need for retribution because the molester might know, you might not be in touch with them anymore. Could have been a neighbor. It doesn't have to be a powerful male. It can be a next door neighbor boy. I mean, it happens a lot. And you literally allow that to leave your body because it's putting on weight. It's making you sick. It's making you nervous. It's causing you to return to relationships with people who do not recognize you, care about you, want to be around you. And you find that your circle of friends changes because you're worthy of being with people who love you. And when they love you, you are able to love yourself. Now, again, mommy is the strongest imprinter of programming. However, the sexual imprinting is so powerful because it has a life of its own. And it was allowed, you attracted it as a little kid, perhaps, because you weren't good enough. You bought a lie. And that's why we do the bad message first. So it's bad, and you try and get good enough till the day you die. And then the sexual urge, the sexual instinct, the ability to express your womanhood that so many women have tamped down by turning morbidly obese. They cannot help themselves. They look at an Oreo and put on 10 pounds. And so you have to get, you're not bad. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not your fault. Let's get rid of the cause. And I'm about getting to cause. And that's what Take Back Your Life does. And in this case, Your First Sexual Imprinting, which is based on Take Back Your Life.
Maxine Taylor, just this week, I did a medical intuitive reading with a woman who wanted to understand why she couldn't lose weight. And of course, you know, when we're stuck with our weight, and we've all been there, you know, there can be many, many factors, which I won't even go into. But I will say this, in her case, I said, part of what's going on is rejection of your femininity. Rejection of your femininity. And so how can this bad message and our first sexual imprinting lead to women rejecting their femininity and rejecting their feminine power?
You just answered it in your question. Brilliant question. Brilliant question. It affects every area of our life, because we cannot express our true self. And even religions will look at women as the temptress, the seductress. And I thought, wow, this is a patriarchy. And this is why so many religions have women cover up their entire body. I mean, I could go on and on with each religion, each cult that tells the woman being a woman makes you second class. I, the man, have the power. Now, not all men are like that. We know that there are some absolutely beautiful men out there who love women and honor women. But our society, our concept of God, our religious background, our cultural background tells us we are second-class citizens. I have a really good friend who says, yeah, well, there is no life without the X. And when she says the X, she means the X chromosome. You cannot have life without an X chromosome. That speaks very clearly to the scientifically minded woman. It helps her see we are terrific and not better than men, not lesser than men, equal in our own way.
Now, Maxine Taylor, I really salute you in having the courage to write about this topic and offer your own unique solution to the challenge that so many of us have experienced. What prompted you to write a book on the first sexual imprinting? Why did you write this book and why now?
Well, now because of the Me Too movement, I realized it was time for me to step forward. I had wanted to write this book forever, seems like. But when I was 21, I spent my 21st birthday with my favorite aunt of all time, my Aunt Helen. And she started asking questions about my family. And she didn't judge, she didn't say anything. And as I answered those questions, I stood back and watched myself speak, and the answers blew me away. It opened my mind to the fact that I had no worth or value to my family past a certain point. And that she got me thinking about that, and I became angry. Not at her. I've been grateful to her forever. And I wanted to become a psychologist. And this was back in the let's see, not early 1960s. I had to think back. It's been so long ago. And my father said, well, what are you going to do with a psychology degree? Well, of course, psychology was a new science then, a new, And so he said, become a teacher, be a school teacher, which I'm glad I did because it prepared me for live TV work, And so when I discovered astrology, I realized it is the best psychological tool for helping somebody. And so now I are one. Unofficially, I don't have alphabet soup after my name. I have no credentials along those lines, but I have over 50 years of working with people and seeing that we are all living Groundhog Day until we stop it. And then we soar. And the one thing that holds us back is the not good enough, the bad message. And once we are bad, we will attract bad things to us. And molestation as a child is one of those bad things. And it's huge. The way we do anything is the way we do everything. And so no matter what topic I use, whether it's money or career or a diet, sometimes the chosen child is just the most wonderful one, and the other child isn't. And the child turns to food because they are so sad, so left out, so unappreciated. And they go into the world and they're just sad. So many people, and they're victims. I can't think of anything worse than living your life as a victim. And yet, look at the news. There are millions of victims. So this is my own small contribution to it. So it started with Aunt Helen on my 21st birthday, Catherine.
As a medical intuitive healer, Maxine Taylor, I completely agree with you that everyone needs a healing to clear the feelings of not good enough and releasing that concept all the way down, because it can be all the way at the cellular level. And as you say, if you feel and believe that you're not good enough, then you're going to feel like you don't deserve the best in life. So I feel like we need a healing on not good enough. And we also need a healing so that you know and experience that you deserve the best in life, that you are a soul, that you have a brilliant soul purpose, that you and you alone are here to share with the world. And as you fully embrace your own power and your own body and your own life, then you can stand in your power more easily. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been Maxine Taylor, astrologer, talking about her new book, Your First Sexual Imprinting, and a method for releasing old emotional trauma. You can find out more about Maxine Taylor and her wonderful work at her website, MaxineTaylor.com. And remember, when you have the courage to go back and release your old imprinting, you free yourself from many patterns that may have been holding you back in every area of your life. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.